All right, Alexander, let's talk about Macron. Let's talk about Marine Le Pen. Let's talk about France and how it's handled the lockdowns and the coup. We'll be a little careful with our words because, well, everyone knows why we have to be careful. But it looks like Le Pen is surging, and it looks like it's real. It looks like Macron has completely bungled the lockdowns, the pandemic, all of that stuff. You were telling me before this video that Macron was hoping to have French pharmaceuticals develop a vaccine, which, I mean, it doesn't sound crazy to say that because France obviously has very successful and well-established pharmaceutical companies, but obviously something has gone wrong or something has been mismanaged there. You'll get into that. But let me read you an article from the Mail Online, Daily Mail UK, which says this, and this is shocking. Left-wing voters would rather let far-right Marine Le Pen get into power than back Emmanuel Macron in next year's French elections, report claims. And let me read you the 4 bullet points which summarize this article. The Liberation article has rattled the ruling party ahead of the 2022 election. That's the first point. Second point, I've blocked the far right in the past and this time it's over. That's a quote, one voter said. I've blocked the far right in the past and this time it's over. The third point is polls predict the election will come down to a battle between Macron and Le Pen. And the fourth point, one survey found Le Pen would win 48% of the vote against the president. So Alexander, we've been here before, and it was Macron was actually the person that they conjured up in order to prevent Le Pen from becoming president. But the dynamics have changed. I should hope that Le Pen has become a lot wiser and a lot smarter to how the deep state and the globalists will try to keep her out of power. So what's going on in France? You can talk about lockdowns. You can talk about Macron's policy with handling the pandemic. Le Pen, I don't know how you want to start this, but give us an update as to the situation in France. Elections are coming in a year. It's right around the corner, guys.
It is right round the corner. And let's first of all talk about Le Pen, because I think it's true that she has been in some ways, across the pack, the front runner before. But this time it is starting to look different. First of all, she's polling between 45 and 48%. If she was the candidate against Macron in the second round. Now, French elections have 2 rounds. There's a first round where they eliminate, all the other candidates, and then the top 2 go forward to the second round. And Marine Le Pen, pretty much every poll says now, would be the person who would go to the second round. Now, in the previous election, when she ran against Macron, she got around a third of the vote in the second round, about 33% of the vote. Macron got over 60%. So he just, won a landslide. Now, according to the opinion polls, they are roughly even. That is extraordinary. That has never happened before. That's never happened before with Le Pen, regardless of which candidate we're talking about, whether it's Macron or Hollande or Sarkozy or Chirac or whoever. So Le Pen has made massive inroads. But the other thing that's beginning to look, and this is, I think, where the major change is, that her vote is starting to solidify. And it seems that a lot of Catholic voters, people who historically have voted for centre-right parties, middle-class Catholic voters, the sort of people who in the last election, the previous presidential election, might have voted for, say, Pierre Fillon, or who in other elections might have voted for people like Chirac, or going even further back, Charles de Gaulle. They're now starting to swing towards her, and they seem to be sticking by her. They seem fairly solid now in backing her, and that's a big vote in France. And the other thing is that, of course, we are starting to see left-wing voters, and I don't mean by this, the sort of neoliberal left-wing voters that you get in all sorts of places like the United States and whatever. I mean the traditional working class, rural voters who voted left, who used to vote left in places, previously they used to vote either for the socialists or once upon a time from the French Communist Party. They are now also solidifying behind Le Pen. And it's important to say that these voters, voting for the left in France historically has been different from voting for the left in, say, the United States or Britain. It's very related to particular events in French history, to the traditions of the French Revolution, to the fact that you might be in a small town, a very small, lovely country town, in a place like I visited fairly recently called Figeac, which looks very prosperous and very, well off and very rural, the sort of place which in the United States would be Republican. It voted for left-wing parties in previous French elections because during the war it was a hotbed of the French resistance movement, and that created a loyalty to left-wing parties, the communists and the socialists, because they were seen as the people who, in that part of France, not all of France I should stress, but in that part of France, had been the centre and the focus of the French resistance. So these people, the bedrock, if you like, of the French nation, are now starting not just to swing behind Le Pen, but to consolidate around her. So her vote is bigger than it has ever been, and it is starting to look solid. On top of that, you have this article in Libération. Libération, I should say, is one of the most important newspapers in France of the left and centre left. As its name implies, it originated also as a newspaper, a publication of the French resistance during the Second World War. It came to existence really towards the end of the Second World War. As Libération says, even people who continue to identify as left, not people who used to vote left once upon a time for historic or cultural reasons, but people who still consider themselves to be left-wing, are starting to say we can't put up any longer with Macron and Macronism and neoliberalism and all those sort of things, and we're now going to start either voting for Le Pen or possibly not voting at all and giving her a clear run for the presidency. So this is a huge sea change, and it's starting to look real. I mean, for the first time, I should say, I actually think that President Le Pen is beginning to look like a real possibility. She still has a mountain to climb. There are still many obstacles in her way. The French political establishment is nothing if not resourceful and guileful, and it remains implacably opposed to her. But firstly, she's winning in places she has never won before, winning over voters she's never won before, and she herself has undoubtedly managed to achieve that which she has aimed for all her political life, which is what she calls normalization. People start to see it as normal to vote for her and for her party, and don't see them any longer as a kind of dangerous far-right extremist fringe. So we're starting to see a shift. Why is this happening? Well, I think what has converted French people to this, and the Gilets jaunes look increasingly like, if you like, the precursor, the overture, the signal that was the way France is shifting. The reason this is happening is because they've had to endure these years of Macronism, coming on top of Hollande, coming on top of Sarkozy, coming on top of Mitterrand and Chirac and all the rest. They are sick and tired of neoliberalism, which has been imposed on them. They're becoming much more sceptical about the EU than they used to be. And I mean, this is beginning to become a really important issue. They are exhausted by the pandemic and the response to the pandemic. That, by the way, is universal across Europe. They are particularly angry with Macron because he constantly gives conflicting signals about this. Sometimes he is the most extreme and hardline supporter of lockdowns, as he was in the summer, and he uses his police, the French police, in the most forceful way to enforce lockdowns in ways that, I mean, in any other country in the West would be considered extreme, and we've discussed some of the things that have happened in parts of the West. But Macron has been particularly tough in that respect. At the same time, in the autumn, he veered in the other direction. He said, well, actually, we don't need lockdowns, that everything's going to be well. We're going to have all these, medications and products coming out of our French pharmaceutical industry. He was instrumental in slowing down the EU response because he didn't really want the EU to start, dealing with especially British or British produced or American produced medications, because he's got the usual complexes that many French leaders have about Anglo-Saxon medications, as he put it like that. And of course, at the same time, he didn't organize development properly in France, which a country like France, the country of Louis Pasteur, and of the great French pharmaceutical industries and of the great French National Health Service, the French Health Service, France ought to have been at the forefront of doing. And now, having failed, he is drifting, France is drifting back towards what is increasingly starting to look like a third lockdown. So people are furious and their businesses are going down, and they feel that there is this malaise and that nothing is working. And they also see Macron making speeches and giving interviews, like an extraordinary interview which he gave recently to the Financial Times, which I discussed on my channel, in which he said, well, we've got all our problems in Europe, but it's Africa we really need to worry about, and we should send medications to Africa because they need these more than we do, not because they actually need them more, but because if we don't go there, the Russians and the Chinese will get ahead of us. So people see that sort of thing in France, and it says that it makes them very angry. They say this man is Napoleon, or think he's Napoleon, and he wants to sort of go around the world and conquer places and do things in places like Africa, and he doesn't really care about us. So all of this is crystallizing now. It's crystallizing behind Le Pen, and it's also suggesting increasingly that Macron's position is sliding.
All right. Is Marine Le Pen far right? Is she far right as they brand her to be?
I think Marine Le Pen, and I've discussed this many, many times, is the ideological and political heir of Charles de Gaulle. Charles de Gaulle was the person who, of course, resisted the Nazis during the Second World War. He was the person who led France against the Nazis, and who was the person who kept the French flag of resistance flying from London, even at a time when the Communist Party in France was working with the Nazis, or at least was not opposing the Nazis in any material way because of the Soviet-Nazi non-aggression pact. So that is the person that Le Pen, I think, identifies with. Now, what did de Gaulle stand for? He was Christian. That was a very important part of his politics. He was a Republican. And this is important because de Gaulle was an aristocrat and a soldier. That tradition had historically been monarchist, but de Gaulle was always a Republican. He was a French nationalist and patriot. He was totally opposed to a EU single state project. He believed in French sovereignty and wanted a strong France, an independent France, a France which pursued its own policies. He was an anti-imperialist. He didn't want France going around the world holding on to colonies, and he had policies while he was president of developing good relations with many countries, and he opposed regime changes, and he famously also opposed the Vietnam War. He believed in good relations between France and Russia, and last but not least, he was very strongly opposed to mass immigration. He said that if you have people, millions of people coming to France from places like North Africa, then that will dilute French culture, which he saw his intention as preserving, and he was against it. He also had an anti-liberal economic policy, what the French call dirigisme, in which certainly he supported small businesses and small enterprises, but he absolutely did not agree in the idea of a globalist, order, of which there was already the first tentative signs in the 60s, with vast flows of money going all swilling around the world and oligarchs making themselves enormously rich. That is all of the things that I've described, which are identified with de Gaulle, seem to me to be exactly the positions that Le Pen holds today. And I've never really seen this significant difference between the two. So I do not understand why people who say that de Gaulle is this democrat and this person who saved France from dictatorship and this anti-fascist claim to find in Le Pen all the things that they say de Gaulle fought against, when, as far as I am concerned, they are the same. In my opinion, is she this far-right monster that people talk about? I would say not only unequivocally no, I would go further and I would say, of course, not.
Okay, real quick, will Le Pen, if she becomes president, take France out of the EU?
Well, this is, of course, the big question, because for a very, very long time, it seemed as if she might.
I've got a follow-up to that
I
as well.
know,
So, yeah.
I know. And she also talked about taking France out of the euro. Now, she's unfortunately, at least I think unfortunately, and I think perhaps mistakenly, watered all this down. Now she doesn't seem to be intending to take France out of the euro, in which case she won't take France out of the EU either. It's a mistake. I think that the kind of economic policies she still advocates and the kind of immigration controls she still seems to hanker for are not consistent with remaining either in the Eurozone or, of course, in the EU. I don't see how the two can work with each other. But apparently she has made the tactical calculation, and I think in her case, more than in Salvini's case perhaps, it is a tactical calculation that she needs to appear to moderate these stances in order to win over those middle class, often elderly Catholic voters that are now swinging behind her, who are worried that quitting the euro would somehow erase their savings. So I think there may be some tactical calculations there, but at the moment she seems to have watered down her position on these things radically. Of course, de Gaulle, who was a colossus, would never have done that, and he would still have won. I don't think Le Pen is a colossus in the way that de Gaulle was.
Okay, even though she may have watered down her policy, her stance to the extent of not pulling France out of the EU, at least her public stance saying that she won't pull France out of the EU. It looks like to me we have a binary choice here for France. I don't think there's a third or even a fourth candidate that's putting pressure on Macron. So I see either Macron or either Le Pen. What does another Macron presidency mean for France, given his track record already? And I would say he is the front runner just because of the fact that the EU and the globalists, no matter how much Marine Le Pen has watered down her public position, they're going to do everything in their power to make sure she doesn't win. So what does another Macron presidency mean?
Indeed. Can I just say, first of all, you're absolutely right. They will play every trick in the book to prevent her winning. And perhaps the fact that they are so determined to prevent her winning shows that they don't really trust her apparent conversion on issues like the Eurozone and the EU and the rest. So I think we need to bear that in mind. I've done a recent program on my channel in which I said that the recent case that was brought against Sarkozy, for example, looked to me very much the French establishment knocking out Sarkozy by raking up these undoubtedly true allegations of corruption against him. But all French politicians are corrupt to one extent, to some extent or another, except perhaps Le Pen, by the way. But all French politicians are corrupt. But they rake those up because they don't want Sarkozy challenging Macron for the presidency, because at the moment they're still determined to keep Macron as the front runner. Now, if Macron wins, then I predict that he will see this as a mandate to do certain things. And one of the things he's going to do, and he talks about this all the time, doesn't really make a secret about it, he talks always about more Europe. There will be a change of government in Germany. The new chancellor, who will probably be Armin Laschet, will be still finding his way and perhaps be a weaker force than Macron is. And of course, Laschet is also a personal friend of Macron. So I expect Macron to go all guns blazing for a single unified tax policy across the EU, a single unified Eurobond policy across the EU, a single European army, submerging the French military into a new European military. I expect him to be pushing hard for all those things. He will also double down heavily on the kind of green policies which we have seen him apply and enforce, and which were the things that originally provoked the original Yellow Vest protests. And I predict we will see much more of that. And of course, he will pursue further identity politics issues, which is something that he's very much champions within France, and also looser immigration controls, which he's also identified with too. So I predict we will see Macron, on steroids, and pursuing policies which the Democrats in the United States would be comfortable with to an even greater extent than he's doing at the moment. And you're right, it is a binary choice. If you want to see a sovereign France becoming more like the kind of France that we used to know, and which is what Le Pen stands for, no real choice, it seems to me, but to support her. If, on the other hand, you want a more neoliberal France, a more globalist France, you go with Macron. And the remarkable thing is that the French left that used to exist, the tradition of Jaurès and all of those people, that's completely disappeared. There is nothing. It's not any sort of force at the moment. And I think the old-fashioned, old-style French socialists, who are deeply patriotic. That's one of the unusual things about French leftism. It was intensely nationalistic, going all the way back to the revolution. Those people, I think, ultimately have more in common with Le Pen than they do with Macron, which is why more and more of them seem to be switching to her.
All right, we'll be following this story, as we said, 2022, right around the corner. Big news. All right, Alexander Burkers, thank you very much, guys. Smash that like button. Make sure you're still subscribed to this channel on YouTube. Also, check us out on all the other video platforms, BitChute, Rumble, and also check us out on Odyssey, guys. Odyssey is a super nice video platform. The Duran's channel is there. Alexander's channel is there. My channel is there. It's all up to date. It's got a great commenting system. The design is super clean, really nice look and feel. It's on the blockchain, so everyone's content, from what I understand, everyone's content is 100% safe, 100% censor proof if it really is built on the blockchain. Like it seems. I mean, it's just a fantastic site. I don't know why they don't get as much promotion or as much shouting out as they should, as much talk. It is really, really nice video platform, guys. Really nice. And of course, the Duran shop. Pick up a hoodie, maybe something like this. I wear this hoodie all the time now, Alexander, because it is just so damn comfortable, to be quite honest. Or pick up a magic mug. When you drink from this magic mug, your geopolitical intelligence skyrockets by maybe 10,000 points. Something like BitChute. It just goes up. It just goes up. like Bitcoin, I mean. Like Bitcoin. But look at something like BitChute. Like Bitcoin, it just goes up.
Absolutely. And of course, you find all the other great things in our shop. We've been talking about France, and here's a hat with the French tricolour. You can see it there. And of course, we have lots of other products with flags of various countries. This one has Australia, for example. This great magic mug has Australia. The sweatshirt I'm wearing is Scotland. And you'll find we got great shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, as Alex says, hats. You can find them all in our shop, and you can support us by coming to our shop. And please remember to subscribe to us, to our various channels. This one, my channel, Alex's channel, the new channel we're doing, where we have all the people we speak to on our lives. And we look forward very much to you joining us again in our next broadcast.
All right. Take care, everybody.